For the Business Affairs and Administrative, roll call, please, Debbie.
Mr. Derman?
Here.
Mr. Hannigan? Mrs. Hines?
Here.
Mr. Luke?
Here.
Mr. Harrell?
Here.
Mrs. Tipton?
Here.
Mr. Jeter?
Here.
Mrs. Seeley?
Here.
Mrs. Mullet?
Present.
Mr. Betancourt?
Here.
Mr. Womack?
Here.
Mr. Hanks? Mr. Lamar?
Here.
Mr. Alfred?
Here.
Mrs. Belisario?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Alfred, would you please lead us in the invocation and pledge, please, sir?
Dear Heavenly Father, bless each and every one of us on the board for this year, for 2013. Make sure that we do things according to your will. We would like also for the teachers, the staff, and all of our children, make sure that they have a very safe year in 2013. Through Jesus' name we pray, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Alfred, thank you. Moving on down the agenda, we have no one that requested time on the agenda, so we're going to move right to the approval of minutes for the committee as a whole meeting held December 6, 2012. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Betancourt, second by Ms. Seeley. Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll all vote, please. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Those abstain. Seeing that, passed. Moving on to number 5, which recommends the acceptance of naming the gymnasium at Covington High School in honor of Coach Hubert S. Hubie Gallagher during the 2012-2013 basketball season. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Foltz, please.
Thank you, Mr. Derman. Board members, you'll see at your packet, I believe you received today and another copies at your desk, a letter that I received before the Christmas holidays from Principal Deborah McCullen at Covington High School. In the letter, she asked for consideration from this board after the Covington High School Ambassador Council met, request approval to rename the gym at Covington High School in honor of Coach Hubie Gallagher. The email goes on to include the members that were on the committee. Also talks a little bit about Coach Gallagher and some of his many, many accomplishments and leadership roles in our school system, and also goes on to tell about how he actually served as a supervisor of physical education towards the end of his tenure in our school system. I can tell you by looking at the requirements and the procedures that are in place by this school system, this board, that the meeting of this committee, along with the recommendation from Principal McCullen, meets all the requirements that would be available, and hope that you will give favorable consideration to this honor, or well-deserved, long-deserved honor to Coach Hubie Gallagher.
With that being said, can I get a motion from motion by Mr. Loop, second by Mr. Betancourt? Any discussion from the board members? But I would like to recognize Coach Gallagher's son, Pat Gallagher. And Pat, would you please step to the podium just for a few words, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. This would be a great honor for my dad. Excuse my partisanship here, but I'm wearing this in honor of him.
We were rethinking this decision there.
Well, between Alabama or Notre Dame, either one.
he would be happy about the honor and how his Fighting Irish are doing as well. But thank you so much. I mean, we literally grew up between the football stadium and the gymnasium, next to the old school board office, and it was a way of life for us and for him. His whole career was devoted to the school system here in Covington. But thank you very, very much. It would be a great honor. Thank you.
If I could, Mr. Derman, I will tell you that I know board members have as well. I've heard from many citizens in the parish for consideration of this, and I know that if the board does decide to move forward on this, I know at next week's meeting we will have a more formal presentation of people that will be here and speak in behalf and honor of Coach Gallagher. But as the process goes, tonight would be the first step.
Thank you. if I may interject just a few personal comments as well. We've been working on trying to accomplish this for several years, and it's long overdue in actually being done. Coach Gallagher was a very, very integral part to Covington High School's development, success, not just as athletics are concerned, but the community, as well as, you know, developing our children and having them grow up into very productive citizens here in the Covington area and throughout St. Tammany Parish. So with that in mind, I would encourage everyone to vote in favor of this dedication. Thank you. So not seeing any more public comments, so the board is ready to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Abstentions? Sounds like the ayes have it. So we'll make the formal presentation at the January 10th board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Okay, and moving to the number 6 on the agenda, Mr. Brady, Administrative.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dermott. Pleased tonight to present our monthly construction report. Ms. Tipton is here, along with Mr. Menino. If you have any questions, she'll be more than happy, or they'll be happy to answer them.
Mr. Alford.
Thank you. Got a question concerning the Mandeville High renovation and guidance area. When we did the contract, we always do all of our contracts that has a specific amount of contract days, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so, when I go through these, it always gets to me, the first change order is asking for a 34-day extension, and we keep adding days to it. Why when we first do it, they always come right back to us and ask us to try to get additional days? Why is that?
Well, they have rights within the contractual agreement for extensions of time relative to rain, or perhaps with regard to additional work that's done by change order or for unforeseen conditions. So it can be for various reasons that are allowed by the contract.
I saw there was no dollar change, so I was just trying to see how they didn't get 34 days right off the bat before they even get started.
I believe, I'm not looking at that, but I think that in that case that was an accumulation of days relative to perhaps rain or time extensions that were being reviewed by the architect, and they did them all in one change order.
Okay. And is there a maximum amount of days that they can request that's in our contracts?
The rain days are established within the contract. There are a certain number of days per month that they have to anticipate that it could rain or be a weather-related delay. And if there are days beyond that, then they could ask for those days time extension relative to weather. But beyond that, no, sir, it just really depends on the job and what the circumstances are and what they might present as a request for time that's considered.
And
Because
Mr. Alford, also, Cameron, why don't you explain, it's not automatic, you know, there's some different steps and process. The architect has to approve it, and then as well as Cameron and Mr. Brady, so it's not an automatic granting of those days. Why don't you explain that whole process?
Yes, sir. They do have to submit their request for time with backup. It has to affect their schedule, and they have to show that. And generally needs to affect their critical path, things that are actually affecting the outcome of the final product of the job. And they need to provide information that supports whatever their claim may be for time. And that's all reviewed by the architect and then is then forwarded to my office if the architect is recommending it.
And then on the other side of that same coin, if they don't complete the project at the stated amount of time plus the extensions, we get some refund back from them. Explain that process also.
Our contracts generally do include a liquidated damages clause, which is a certain amount of dollars per day for any day in which they go beyond the contract time. And that contract time can change by change order with time, as we were just discussing. But if they go beyond the contractual time, then it is a liquidated damages clause for dollars per day until they finish. Yes, sir.
And we have went to those contractors and received dollars back from them, correct?
Yes, sir, we do.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Albert, you good with that? Thank you, Ms. Tipton. Okay, anyone else? Not seeing any. Mr. Brady?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Tipton. Our monthly maintenance and custodial report, Mr. Richmond, Mr. Singletary, Mr. Barker, Mr. Rourke are here. If you have any questions, we'll be glad to entertain them.
Looks like none, so we'll move on.
Mr. Kurt Gaspard in our risk management department is he present for any questions you may have about our risk management report for this month.
Looks like none again, Mr. Brady.
Ms. Amy is out ill this evening, but she capably has two great assistants, Ms. Masters and Ms. Buell. They're both here to answer any questions you may have on transportation if I can't handle them prior to that time.
Mr. Alford?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I got a question on the transportation management team. They conduct these monthly safety meetings on topics, and one of the topics was driver fatigue. If someone could kind of explain how that goes with our bus drivers, the driver fatigue.
Well, Mr. Gaspard, through our insurer, our general liability insurer, also helps conduct these meetings. And it just basically, driver fatigue is people that tend to get burned out on their job, or they have some problems with, the physical part of the job. It's just to kind of make sure that our drivers are constantly being trained and retrained. We do have a more comprehensive report that's hopefully going to be ready and be prepared for the February CAW meeting that will answer many of those questions about some of the new things going on in transportation. But it's just it's a safety type meeting, safety alertness.
When I looked at that, I saw the driver fatigue as one of the areas that they taught. I was just trying to see how would someone observe that a driver is fatigued, and the process that goes if a principal or one of the management team sees that there's a driver fatigue, and what's the process that
well, as they would do in any driver who is not performing, that we would hope the way they would perform to our high standards, they would certainly be those issues would be addressed with the management individuals, Ms. Amy and Ms. Buell, Ms. Masters. They could also be recommended, to have a physician be observed, or have a physician take a look at it. A lot of times it's just these things are proactive type activities that the management people in our transportation department are constantly looking at to make sure that we don't have any drivers that are falling into that fatigue or getting tired and driving longer than they should. We make sure they don't drive beyond the times that they're the amount of hours that they're allowed to drive. They're like most of our employees. They have basically a 7-hour day limit, and we try to very, very closely monitor that so we don't get into any trouble with them driving longer than they should. But these are just safety type meetings that boost
Board member, if you'll remember at the December meeting, we promised you a full report tonight. The PowerPoint was finished. It was sent to me over the holidays and reviewed, and we were ready to go. And over the last couple of days, Kathy Amy, director, has come down with a really bad case of flu and could not get out of bed and couldn't get to work. And we could have given it tonight, but I thought it was important for her to be here as the director that lives this day to day. So with your approval, I would ask that we extend that till the February committee as a whole meeting, and we have a nice, very comprehensive PowerPoint that addresses that issue. I know Mr. Betancourt, it was kind of the one that got us started on that, to address some of his concerns, and then we'll be able to open it up for some good question and answer discussion as well. So I apologize for that, but this is one situation where I thought it was important to wait till Kathy was back from her illness.
Okay.
That's all I have, Mr.
You good? Anyone else? Seeing none, moving on to school safety update, Mr. Folse.
Thank you, Mr. Durman. Tonight I would like to update you all on the school safety situation. Ever since the unfortunate incident that we all experienced and know of that happened at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, we have taken some proactive steps as we move forward and thought I would share some of those with you here tonight. As we all know, the incident took place on Friday, December 14th. Around noontime, we actually got the word and started going on the phone and others that there had been a situation at the school. And as the day went on, of course, we all learned more and more about how sad and unfortunate it was. Monday morning, the first thing that we did was I conducted a conference call with all of our principals. Every principal, every site manager was in on a conference call. And at that conference call, we just basically reviewed our protocols, including our proactive readiness emergency plan, which we call our PREP plan. We also dealt with any immediate safety issues or concerns that any principals might have had, whether it be like a maintenance problem that maybe they had reported it hadn't been taken care of, whether it be a custodial issue, whether it be a law enforcement issue, any of these things that for one reason or another was bothering or concerning a principal, we immediately addressed that as a group. And I will tell you, once we hung up from the conference call, we received some phone calls from individual questions that, well, maybe something that a principal didn't feel comfortable discussing with all the other principals, but felt better calling me after the conference call. So we took a couple calls like that. And then we also advised them at our next principals meeting, which will be Thursday of next week, that our main topic and our main feature of discussion at that principals meeting will be our school safety discussion issues there. I think it was just a good opportunity after all the weekend. I know we all watched more than we would have liked to watch of that, but I think it was important for me as superintendent and as others as principals to watch and learn what we could from those. And I think after watching that all weekend and being moved by it and being touched by what happened, it was good for us to get together as principals, although it was on a conference phone call, and just share with each other and discuss and things like that. We did that, and I think it worked out well. We heard from a lot of principals that they appreciated the conference call and helped them as they move forward in dealing with students, teachers, and parents that were concerned as well. Also on Monday, we sent a letter home to the parents. I think I made you a copy of that letter when I sent it, and also one at your desk tonight. And in the letter, we just talked about it was definitely a difficult tragedy for everyone to understand, and especially of our children. In the letter to the parents and caregivers, we offered extra mental health providers, and I can tell you at schools we did have students that took advantage of those mental health providers, and we had parents, and we had teachers, and we had administrators that felt the need that they needed to talk to mental health providers at our schools, and that's what they're there for, and it certainly were a benefit there as well. In the letter, we also talk about that we make every effort to make sure that our schools are safe and secure learning environments. But we also realize and know that no system is perfect and that we must never, ever let our guard down. I think back to the school security conference I went to in Washington, D.C. a couple years ago. We produced a video, and I remember in the video I said, school security is something that you must keep up with each and every day, that we can never think that we're as secure as we need to be, that we must always be reviewing and looking at proactive ways to increase our school security. I went on to talk and remind our parents and others that our principals meet on a monthly basis with our sheriff and other law enforcement agents, and we review and revise constantly as we go on. And then in the letter I talked also about that with law enforcement. I can tell you, on Friday afternoon, Jack Strain, the sheriff, calls and says, what can I do to help? As we all know, with our law enforcement, we have great working relationships with law enforcement, and Jack Strain, as always, is there for the school system, picks up the phone and says, what can we do to help? So with their help, we will also be continuing to review what happened in Newtown, seeing what we can learn from that, seeing what we can gather from that. I know law enforcement is doing the same things, so we'll be debriefing with them as we move forward to see what we have learned from that could help our school system as we go. Since the incident, some things that we've done, as I mentioned, we've talked to the sheriff. We've also talked to other law enforcement leaders across this parish. Remind you that Jim Suit, Bob Donnell, our two security coordinators, have been out into the schools. They've been making contacts with the administrators at the schools, also making contacts with law enforcement. Must tell you and mention to you that I've received phone calls, emails, letters, all different means of communication from parents, teachers, students, and others. Many people have different ideas and thoughts and suggestions from total different spectrums of what we should do and what we can do better. I will tell you that every idea that we've received will be considered, it will be reviewed, it will be shared with law enforcement, and if there's an idea out there that makes sense and it's an idea that law enforcement believes is something that can benefit the school system, then we're certainly going to take care of that. We will continue to take advantage of crisis planning learning opportunities. I can tell you there was a webinar today that it was put on that Mike Kosei participated in. The Department of Justice continues to send out new and updated information and offers webinars. The U.S. Department of Education constantly updates their readiness manuals, and the State Department of Education updates theirs as well. As I mentioned, we will have a principals meeting Thursday of next week, and I can assure you that the majority of that meeting will be on the topic of school safety and crisis planning and management. I look for the meeting to be very honest and frank and open, and we will have all of our people there to make sure that we're there to meet the needs of the principals. As I told the principals on that conference call, no one knows their campus better than they do. No one. And it's their responsibility, which they totally understand, to make sure that their campus is a safe and secure learning environment. And we must count on them to make sure that on a day-to-day basis they're doing that. And I know they're committed to doing that, and I know that we need to continue to make sure that we do not put our guard down in any way whatsoever. At the principals meeting, we will have a brief presentation to review our practices and our protocol, and then, as I mentioned, we'll have some discussion, and we'll be there to make note of anything that needs to be done, anything that can be improved upon. In the closing of my letter, and I think it says it best, we talked about that safety of our students is our primary concern. And I assure the parents, and I assure you here as board members, as a school system, and I as the superintendent are committed to doing whatever it takes to make sure that our students are in a learning environment that is safe and secure, and we will do everything possible to make sure that we can maintain that on a daily basis in our school system. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have or address any other issues dealing with the school safety.
Thank you, Mr. Foles. Any questions? Board members? From the audience? I just got a comment. As a parent and a grandparent, it was a very concerning event that took place, and it is very unsettling to everyone. So I really appreciate your efforts and our administration's efforts and to try to do what y'all could do to reinforce the fact that we have a safe learning environment here in St. Tammany in our school system, and that's very appreciated. Thank you. Moving on now, business affairs. Ms. Fortenberry.
The purchasing report is in your packets, and Ms. Stevens is here to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on. And I've been told that we're going to save the announcements from the president for the next committee meeting as a whole. So as far as I'm concerned, this meeting is adjourned, and we will be meeting again within about 10 minutes.
Let's go. We announced, Mr. Dermott, not to overrule you as chairman, but we had promised 15 minutes between the meetings for anyone that might be coming that wasn't in attendance.
Okay, I'm sorry. 15 minutes.
I'm going to call this meeting, the committee as a whole meeting, January 3rd, 2013, Human Resources and Education, to order. Mrs. Campbell, roll call, please.
Mr. Hannigan? Mrs. Heinz?
Here.
Mr. Derman?
Here.
Mr. Loop?
Here.
Mr. Harrell?
Here.
Mrs. Tipton? Mr. Jeter?
Here.
Mrs. Seeley?
Here.
Mr. Betancourt? Mr. Womack? Mr. Panks? Mr. Lamarck? Mr. Alford? Mrs. Belisario? Mrs. Mullet?
Present. Thank you. We're going to dispense with the invocation and the pledge, since we just had it about 15 minutes ago. And there was no persons requesting time on the to speak tonight. So we're going to go down to item number 5, approval of the minutes of the committee as a whole meeting held on November 15th, 2012. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
It was moved and moved by Mrs. Hines, second by Mrs. Tipton. Any questions? Comments? All in favor? Aye. All oppose? All abstain? Mary Kay's abstain. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Item number 6, instruction. We have Mrs. Araby, Top Gain School Spotlight. Mrs. Araby, you have the floor.
Good evening. Tonight we'd like to give you an update on one of our most recent celebrations that we held here last month, and it had to do with our Top Gains schools for the school year 2012. The requirement for being considered a Top Gains school is that the schools had to meet their growth target and they had to meet the adequate yearly progress. With that, we're very pleased that in St. Tammany Parish Public Schools, we had a total of 27 schools, which you can see here listed this evening. Being one of the 27 schools, you can see here that we did have our superintendent, John White, who came to visit us and to present us with some money, which of course the schools were very excited about. And here's all of our school principals on stage, as well as some of our board members who were able to attend the presentation. What will this money be used for? It can be used for supplies, it can be used for software, it can be used for hardware, equipment, as well as professional development for our teachers. You can see that our schools are going to be very excited as they get their money, which is right over $8,000 at each school. So this money can be used for any educational purpose. Superintendent White was here. He presented the check to Superintendent Trey Foles in the amount of right over $228,000. It was a very nice celebration as we all met in the atrium, and our principals attended with a parent representative as well as a teacher representative, and we decided that the students, due to that it was during exams as well as the very festive holiday season, that we knew that it was best that they stayed back at their schools, which they did. But we were able to congratulate all of our schools and to thank the stakeholders, as we know everyone working together to make our schools the very best that they can be. So, as usual, our Channel 13 was there, and so they have put together a little chalk talk to give us a little update and a review of that celebration.
State Superintendent of Education John White recognized 27 St. Tammany Parish schools. Over $225,000 was earned by the schools in our district.
This is the largest group of Top Gain schools of any parish in the country, of any parish in the state.
While there was a real buzz in the air, what with the sheer numbers of schools recognized in the parish, those in attendance would tell you that the focus of all the excitement should be in the classroom.
It's only an attempt to capture what is millions of moments in the lives of each individual child and each individual teacher. Going the extra mile, making that extra phone call, having that kid stay extra for 10, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. Those little things add up, and they add up to the ability to say that we made great gains like we did today.
Those gains do bring with them some monetary rewards, but it's always nice to get a pat on the back.
The money's always nice, but the recognition is just as important, to recognize everyone for their hard work.
I think it pays tribute to the hard work that all of our teachers and all of our support personnel and administration puts into educating children right here in St. Tammany Parish.
And it is that type of hard work that should be acknowledged.
The teachers are the ones giving our state a shot in the arm, because they're the ones that are propelling our kids to new heights. And so when you have examples of them doing a great job, we should shout it from the rooftops.
They finally have that feeling, I'm being recognized. My effort, my time, my energy really has been recognized by him and the state.
A total of 440 schools were recognized statewide as having earned top gain status. Tiger Edwards, Channel 13.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Araby. I just got a question concerning our special education side of the house. I know John Whitehead went to New Orleans and given over $1.3 million to their special ed gains. How do we fall with our special ed here in St. Tammany?
Well, actually, this was a separate, I guess, a separate pot of money, because the top gains was strictly for this award had to do with school performance scores in schools meeting their growth target, which could be anywhere from 2 points or more. Special ed in this part, those are all a part of that score that is shown here.
And the reason why I was asking about the special ed, because I know we do an excellent job with our special ed program here. And the people for New Orleans and Jefferson, they all try to move over to St. Tammany because of our special ed program. But Orleans getting recognized for their special ed programs, and it's just mind-boggling to me.
Well, I would certainly agree that with our more than 16% of our students falling in the area of special ed, and looking at how our special ed scores have continued to have that trend of making gains in the area of ELA and math, I think it's largely due certainly because of the great teachers we have in the classrooms, and also think it can be attributed to the great job that our special ed department continues to do with making sure that that professional development is being provided so that the teachers have what they need in order to provide for the students. So certainly I believe that our special ed department, students, and our special ed teachers are top in the state.
Mrs. Hines?
I just want to say that I think having the most schools that just achieve more than any other system in the state is a very significant action for St. Tammany Parish. We weren't really surprised because, you know, y'all are in the classrooms every day. You see what the teachers are doing, what the principals are doing. The administrators are working hard for it, and I think this is something that we really should shout from the rooftops. I'm very proud of everybody. I know that the entire board would like to say thank you to the superintendent, the administrators, especially to the teachers, principals, and the students for working so hard. It's just a fabulous thing to happen to our school system. I'm really proud of it, and I think we really deserve a lot of recognition for it.
Thanks, Mrs. Hines. Mr. Derman?
Thank you. Sarah B., you mentioned about the funding is different than the special ed, but I guess it's also different than our MFP funding, and that this is a separate check that is going to go, it's like $5,000 something per school. Is that correct?
Actually, it's right over $8,400 that goes to each school.
Okay.
And they will spend the money accordingly. But yes, it's a separate pot of money.
And then we get that money in a lump sum to give to the school, so it's not going to be like prorated on a monthly basis or
Correct.
something?
And we will be using it as any grant in making sure that it's spent accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda we have, excuse me, Certified Personnel Evaluation Process, Dr. Mott, Dr. Stanford, and Mr. Clanton.
Good evening. Tonight I'm here to share with you an overview of the Compass, Louisiana's Educator Evaluation Model. First, I want to refresh your memory that this year we have two very large initiatives that we were charged with implementing across the state. The first one is Common Core, and Common Core deals with curriculum, and it represents rigorous expectations for student learning. And the second initiative is Compass, and Compass deals with educator evaluation, and it reinforces the shifts in instructional practice that the Common Core brings. One of the first things that Ms. Araby did at the beginning of these initiatives is to appoint team members from central office to be in charge of each of these. And for Compass, the team consists of Mr. Clanton, Dr. Sanford, and myself. And the reason that teams were appointed is because so much information was coming at us at a very fast pace that she felt like if we had point people, our administrators would know who to call when there was a question about each of these initiatives. Also, the point people from central office knew that when the notices came out from the State Department, we went straight to Compass and learned everything that we could learn about Compass. And we attended all the meetings at the state regarding Compass. And also, the three of us volunteered to be trainers for this so that our administrators could be on the cutting edge of each piece of this initiative. Part of this rollout also included getting the information out to our educator population as fast as possible. And so what we did was to use the awesome communication tools that we have in place already to get these messages out. And all of you are very familiar with Blackboard, but I thought it would be nice for you to see that how our rollout occurs. If you look, each month has a folder, and within that folder contains the documents of like PowerPoints, handouts, helpful hints, or anything else we felt our administrators could re-deliver to their teachers to make this initiative a little more pleasant. Then in the summer, the professional development for our administrators intensified at the administrators conference. And here you can also see a toolkit. And the expectation with these toolkits is that they're re-delivered to the schools in the format that we give to the administrators. And there you can see is the Compass folder that we developed for our administrators. And when you open the Compass folder, things that you would find in there, again, helpful hints, PowerPoints of stuff to re-deliver back to the teachers, handouts for the teachers. One of the handouts that I have highlighted here is a flow chart. And the flow chart was entitled, "Which Student Growth Measure is for Me?" Now let's look at the process and the components of Compass. Compass is a cycle, and it begins with teachers setting goals for themselves and for their students at the beginning of the year. During the year, teachers are observed and they're given feedback, specific feedback from their evaluators. And from those observations, if deficiencies are noted or perhaps areas that need enhancement are noted, administrators provide support through our curriculum specialists, resource helping teachers, and other venues to help teachers with this process. At the end of the year, teachers are evaluated from two components, student growth and professional practice, or their observations. Once these evaluations are done, the data from the evaluations is used by the administrators and by us to inform decision making. Some of the decisions that we will make from this information could include which areas of instruction are teachers having difficulty with? Where do we need to offer professional development? Are there any holes being noted in our curriculum that we need to enhance? Should we pair teachers with a different teacher than they're teaching with now? Those are some of the decisions that could be had from this information. How is Compass calculated? Compass is calculated using two components. Student growth. Some teachers will write student learning targets, and they will receive scores on how well they did in reaching those student learning targets. Teachers who teach in a grade that is tested will receive a value added score, and their student growth score will come from the value added. The other side of the calculation is from professional practice, the observations. Each teacher is going to be observed a minimum of 2 times. One observation is announced, and one observation is informal or unannounced. And these observations are scored against a rubric. Once you have the scores for each side, a student growth score that will be ranging from 1 to 4, and a professional practice score ranging from 1 to 4, you add those 2 scores together. Once you add the 2 scores together, you divide by 2 for an average. The average is then attached to a label, and those are where the labels come from that you've been hearing about. If, at the bottom, if either component is scored as ineffective, that component score will automatically override the other component score. In other words, the 50-50 formula will not be used in this instance. Let's talk about professional practice, or the observations, and the Danielson rubric. A rubric is a scoring tool, and in this particular place, the role of the rubric is to communicate clear performance standards. It's to establish a common language among all educators. The rubric will present accurate reflections of performance to the evaluator and to the educator, and it applies to teachers in all subjects and grade levels. The rubric is called the Danielson rubric because it is an offshoot of the original Charlotte Danielson rubric, which contained 22 components. The state of Louisiana contracted with Ms. Danielson and culled the rubric down to 5 components, which fall under 3 domains. You do have a copy of the scoring rubric at your desk. So let's look at that. How is this rubric used? We're looking at the second component, managing classroom procedures. Some of you may remember that as being called classroom management from the LeTap model. And one of the things that we have found from the COMPAS process is that we have many ideas and concepts that all of us know from the past, which when this came about, we tried to fit what we already know with the new stuff and found that very helpful, that there are many things in common. If you look at the rubric and look at the first row across, managing classroom procedures, those boxes give an overall or a general picture of what it would look like in that classroom. If you go to the second row, the critical attributes, this is what a classroom should look like at the different levels. And then at the bottom, possible examples. And you can go across, and if you look at effective proficient, and you can read if an administrator or an evaluator is in the classroom, this is the tool that they will use to score the teacher. So while they're in the classroom, they take low inference notes, then go back to their office, and they look at this rubric and they say, where on the continuum did this teacher fall? What evidence do I have from her observation to support the score that I'm going to place in managing classroom procedures? Now, that's the rubric in a nutshell. But please note that since this initiative has been presented to us at the leadership meetings, we have dissected this rubric component by component. We have practiced the rubric using videos. We have had conversations about the scores and compared our scores with each other, and we have become very proficient in the use of this rubric. Also, the videos that we used and the videos that the state sends us, and they have been sending us more on a regular basis, are available to the principals and to leadership teams at the school level to do the same activities, to practice what is my administrator looking for when they come into my classroom. So in a nutshell, that was the professional practice component of Compass. Regina will go on with student growth.
For student growth, the teachers fall into two different areas. The first is the tested grades and subjects, which is the value-added model. And from this, you will see that third grade ELA math, fourth through eighth grade ELA reading, math, science, social studies as well, science and social studies. Algebra 1 and geometry are the only two high school subjects. However, it's very important for you to note that it's only ninth grade students in Algebra 1 or geometry, and you may be asking why. The why is because this is a student growth model, meaning that the state must have 1 year of pre-testing data on students in order for this model to work. So all other teachers will fall under the non-tested grades and subjects under SLTs. Another important note, even though teachers may fall under the value-added model, all of our teachers are writing SLTs because it's very important for teachers to have a goal in which to set and shoot to achieve. The value-added model, exactly how are these scores calculated? These scores are not calculated by us, but by the state. So what the state does is to match student by student based on various characteristics, such as gifted, 504, attendance, discipline, and many others. And then the question is asked, is the student going to achieve more growth, less growth, or the expected growth? The expected growth receives a score of a 0. That is what the student should achieve with 1 year of instruction. Less is going to be a negative number, and more is going to be a positive number. And all of these teachers are writing SLTs to help them achieve this score. A student learning target. Now let's switch gears and go to the non-tested grades and subjects, as well as get an understanding of an SLT. It's basically just a goal based upon 3 characteristics. One is priority content, the second is rigor, and the third is high quality evidence. And we're going to look at 3 examples and how this looks. The state gave in the spring some exemplars. These are 3 of the state's exemplars. Let's take the one at the top, U.S. history. Well, that is our content. So U.S. history standards and benchmarks would be the content for this SLT. 21 out of 25 students achieve a score of 65 out of 80. That is the level of rigor set by the teacher in this example, and the assessment is the end of course assessment. So all SLTs must have 3 characteristics. Now, in St. Tammany, as you all know, we strive to be the very best at anything we attempt to do. Even though the timeline for writing the SLT process, according to this, was to begin in the summer, we actually met with the principals back in the spring, got input from them, and they said to the team, look, we need, on behalf of our teachers, all of the guidance and support that the district can possibly muster so that when we start school, they have a strong support network. So over the course of the summer, with the advice of our curriculum specialists, input from all of the supervisors, as well as volunteer teachers, we contracted within our own people to start writing district SLTs. Because even though our principals are awesome principals, it's safe to say that no one principal is well versed to help every individual teacher in every single content area. They wanted some consistency across the district. So that was the reason we assembled a team to start writing and begin to compile a panel of experts. So we did that this summer.
So teachers started with some example district SLTs as go-bys this fall. At the beginning of the year, each teacher had 2 SLTs. They could be based upon a whole class or a subset of students. Mid-year, the principal and the teacher will meet to review and to take a look. Are we on target for meeting this SLT? And then at the end of the year, that SLT will be scored. So, back to the compass calculation. The teachers will obtain their final rating sometime anywhere from, say, May to June, because as you know, we have to wait on state testing data to come back. It's very important for you to know that if a teacher is a VAM teacher, even though the teacher has written 2 SLTs, VAM teachers, that score is overridden automatically. And the teachers would fall into 4 different categories, ranging from ineffective to highly effective. Also, you should note that we talked about teachers, but our principals as well as our counselors also have rubrics and are measured using this same process, the student growth model as well as professional practice. Mr. Clinton.
Thank you. Good evening. Happy New Year. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the Human Capital Information System, or HCIS. This is the State Department of Education's web tool that school systems are to use all across the state to record all of the information relative to the Compass evaluations being conducted this year. As has been mentioned, we at the central office received our training on the HCIS system during the summer, and we in turn, along with the State Department of Education, facilitated training our administrators on this system. Our principals and assistant principals then redelivered this training to their faculty members. The HCIS system is used statewide for all employees in the value added model and the student learning target part of the Compass evaluation process. Each employee inputs their 1 professional growth plan and at least 2 student learning targets. These are reviewed and approved by their administrators. Each time an administrator completes an official classroom observation, and after conferencing with the employee, those results are entered into the HCIS system. As of mid-December, we had a little over 2,300 observations already entered into the system. At the end of this school year, Regina said late May to early June, we're certainly hoping for that, all final observations by administrators will be entered into the system. The value added and the SLT scores will be entered and then compiled by the HCIS system, and each employee will receive their composite score, which can range from ineffective to highly effective. Dr. Mott?
So before we close our presentation, I think it's important to share with you feedback, both positive and not so positive, from our educators. Our principal said the rubric gives us specifics with regard to the types of professional development needed to help teachers improve instruction. We are still getting everything done as before, but the new evaluation process using Compass has greatly increased our after-hours workload. And the teachers, as a pattern, say we are concentrating on the 5 components as we enhance our instruction to meet the needs of each student. This new evaluation has increased our stress levels. The Compass team. I didn't write with the Compass team our comments because I thought that they might be kind of long, but I thought it would be nice to share them with you. When we were given this charge over a year ago, we became known as the Compass Queens and King. I wasn't sure how to take that, and then toward the end we became like Nazis, I think. But I want to say that through this rollout, it's been very hard, and it's been hard for us, but it's been really hard for our administrators and our teachers. But they have risen as higher than what we expected them to rise, and you have to know that they have implemented this initiative with fidelity and with integrity, and they have really been incredible. So that's our comments to this. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mott. Board members, do we have any comments or questions? I'll start with you, Ray.
The Rubik, when it first came out, it had 20, before we adopted in Louisiana, it was 21 elements to it. Did you all look at all the 21 elements to see if the 5 plus other elements that was in the cubic would benefit St. Tammany?
We did look at them, and it was quite lengthy. And one of the downfalls about those 22 elements is that it would take days to evaluate one teacher. And I do think the 5 that they chose closely match the LATAP model, which is what we used before to evaluate teachers. So we were very familiar with it, and I do feel that the 5 that they chose are comprehensive.
Okay, and I guess the other, this is you got so many questions that you could ask. I know other board members have questions too. But the other question that I had was for the person that would evaluate the classroom teacher, how many hours is per each set of, I think it's two evaluations. How many hours do they spend per teacher?
Well, the average that we're hearing is 3 hours per observation.
Per observation.
And there are 2 observations per teacher. Some principals can do it a little faster, and some do it a little slower.
Okay, so 6 hours is the evaluation is based on about 6 hours of evaluation time. And one last one, then I'm going to give the floor. The teachers are allowed to write the target step for each child, or is that target is already given to them by the state?
The student learning targets, what Regina talked about, are the targets that are written for each subject. For example, the history one, where it said I think it said 65 out of 80 of my students will score a certain level on the end of year assessment. That would be one of their targets. And the second one, they could write, let's say that they had 8 students who had special needs in their classroom. They could write one just for those 8 students, pinpointing their weak areas. Or on the other hand, if they had a group of gifted students who had already surpassed the percent that was expected on that student learning target, they could write one for their general population and then one for the gifted students who had already exceeded that and raised the bar for them. And we did write those for our teachers, and they could mold them to a certain extent to fit the needs of their classroom or their school.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hines?
I have a question about the student learning targets. I had just assumed that those were the goals and objectives, and that they were written with lesson plans like on a weekly basis. So how does
that fit in? Goals and objectives have always been written on a weekly basis or a daily basis for students. And some teachers wrote goals for a yearly basis, but as a practice, we didn't write goals for the year. These student learning targets are, where did my students start at the beginning of the year? And after 8.5 months, 9 months of teaching, looking at their starting point, where do I expect them to end up with the assessment that is given at the end of the year? So the difference is the ones that we've always written were either daily or weekly, about what the student will do in 55 minutes or in a week's worth of classes, whereas this is these big assessments, where did they start and where are they going to end up at the end of the school year.
But they're still the teachers are still writing
yes, ma'am.
Goals and
they
objectives.
Still write their lesson plans.
It would seem like it would be hard for the evaluator to come in and have such a general student learning target to, to pinpoint where you are in the process.
The assessments that we have, for example, first grade, our first grade experts wrote assessments based on the content that is taught for the entire year for first grade students. And so they gave this assessment. And then they looked at the results of their assessment. This is where my kids have started. After I teach them for an entire year, where will they end up? The principals are starting to get used to seeing these assessments and what's expected in the end. It's a process, and it's been really hard, and we're learning as we go this new yearly type student learning target.
Well, I saw a lesson modeled in another parish, and it was supposed to be following the Compass rules. And the first thing the teacher said was, today we will do this, you know, so I assume
Setting
that
instructional outcomes. In this rubric, they can move up to a higher level if they have those critical attributes that I talked about earlier. And so what they're learning is that saying that, and we have, that was part of the LATAP model too, and that has been one of the things we're taught as teachers, that if you tell the class at the beginning of class what they're going to learn, it sets the stage. And sometimes when you teach for a few years, you might not remember that, but the Compass rubric spells it out and says you should be doing this at every lesson. Today we will learn. And that's part of the setting instructional outcomes rubric.
Ms. Hines, just to kind of clarify a little more, using the history example as a basis, you're going to have goals every single day in your classroom. But if you're going to cover the period from, say, you know, let's just pick a year, 1877 to present, that's a lot of content to cover. So what our panel did this summer was to try to align it with what should the exit outcome be. So in American history this year, we'll have an end of course test. So what are the big ideas? What should every student sitting in an American history test be able to answer or do at the end of the course? So it's not daily, but over the entire scope of time.
Okay. Appreciate the clarification.
Thank you. Mr. Derman?
Thank you, Ms. Mullet. Ms. Mott, I guess my question is, if we go to like page 2 where we talk about the in our handout, I'm sorry, which is the Compass calculations, and it talks about the value added score where available. And it's further in there, but I guess my question is, if it's not available, then what happens to your score?
If it's not available, those are the teachers who don't give the teachers who are not in tested grades and subjects. So those student learning targets become very important because your score is going to come from those targets.
So it could adversely affect those teachers that are in there because it's more, I guess, the score or their effectiveness is graded on one segment more so than on the 50% of the two of those added together.
No, the teachers who are in the student learning targets side, they have 2 targets that are written based on the big assessments and how they predict their students will do at the end of the year. The people who are in the value added score, their score comes from the test that is given, another big assessment, and the growth, it's a growth model, so the growth of the student learning targets from where they started to where they ended, and then the value added, where the students started, where they ended. So it's the score is based on the student's growth.
Okay.
Did I answer
well, we all know
question?
this isn't my forte, so I'll just leave it on, go to somebody else.
Mrs. Seeley?
Thank you, Ms. Mullet. Dr. Mott, I have a question in the student learning targets, on that part of it. Were demographics considered at any point in that?
Yes, in those student learning targets, there's a rationale that the teachers have to state why is it that they're writing the student learning target on the end of course assessment. And so they tell why they're using that big assessment to assess these students. And then at the bottom of their student learning targets, there's an area called baseline data. And what they include in that baseline data is kind of a profile of their class. They make statements like, I have 50 students and these are the scores, and then they might put notes down there. 3 of those students are inclusion students, 8 are gifted, that kind of thing. So they're kind of like their demographics down there. And then in the student learning target part, taking those things into consideration, the starting points and the students, they predict where they will end up after teaching those students for 8.5, 9 months.
Thank you.
Mr. Lamarck?
Thank you. I do have a number of questions. And I do appreciate, and I know that our faculty and staff and principals and everybody else are going to do is exactly what they need to do. And you complimented them a moment ago, and I will again. I know our teachers are going to come up and rise to this occasion. However, beyond what appears to me to be an incredible amount of extra work for everyone, and the fact that these assessments are going to reflect upon the salaries of the individuals that are being assessed, what is it different about this than LaTap?
Different format. In LaTap, the only teachers who were evaluated were new teachers, whereas in Compass, it's every teacher twice a year, every year. The LaTap did not have a growth model. This is based on student growth. Those are
LaTap sort of accomplished a lot of the same stuff that this is trying to accomplish, but with a lot less headaches, it seems to me. You're also saying that we need to have a final assessment to know where the students have gone, see whether or not they've added any value. And you were talking about their starting point. How do you determine the starting point?
The starting point is determined by assessments, either
So
that...
it's a pre-test?
Yes, it's like a
And then the assessment is a post-test?
Yes, sir. Pre-test, post-test design.
Well, sure, it makes sense, but it's kind of, if a teacher knows that they give a pretest, now the pretest obviously is going to have the stuff on it that they're supposed to know at the end of the time, right?
Yes, sir.
What's to prevent the teacher from simply teaching that test all year long so that their kids will score really high on that test?
Well, I think my answer to you from a personal point would be honesty and integrity.
And our teachers are full of that, and I know that, and they work real hard to educate our kids.
But
this just seems to me to be a stumbling block.
I think the test that the pre-test that we've designed have a great sampling of the major concepts that are to be taught during the year, and to be able to answer a great sampling on a pre-test, they might not be able to do. But to answer it on the post-test, the same questions are not going to be asked. So those samplings or those concepts have to be developed in the end so that they can answer them correctly.
Oh, I agree that teaching is going to go on. Of course, teaching is going to go on. It always does. I just see this as a, I don't know. I'm not real happy about it. I'm glad I'm not teaching anymore because I think I'd go insane trying to do this stuff. But thank you for all your hard work, and thank all of the teachers for all their hard work. I appreciate it.
Mr. Liu?
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Dr. Mott, okay, each teacher is going to get a score at the end of this year.
Yes, sir.
And how does that affect them for next year?
If it depends on their score. If they get a score of, if you look at the chart, effective emerging, effective proficient, highly effective,
Right.
they go on as normal. If they get a score of ineffective, the troops are sent in to help them because we don't want any of our teachers to be ineffective. And if we can help them get out of the ineffective range, we're going to get them out of the ineffective range. So they will continue teaching with intensive assistance efforts to help them improve. If at the end of their second year they remain in the ineffective range, then at that time, according to Act 54, dismissal proceedings would start.
Okay. And so does that salary or et cetera, whatever the scores are based on at the end of this year, does that go into effect for next year? Or do we have one more year to be able to get them before we actually start hitting with the pay and the other things that we had to come up with on salary schedule?
Actually, the score that they earn this year, 2012-13, will determine their salary for 13-14.
Okay. I was just making sure there's something that I was confused. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Bellisario?
Thank you. I'm still taking notes. Let me see if I got this correctly. The SLTs. They're not every teacher is not designing them for every individual student, but rather groups like regular ed, special ed, gifted. Okay, so they're not doing one for every student. Okay.
They could.
They could.
They could do it for every student. Let's say that in a special needs class, I might only have 5 students.
Right.
In a special needs class, sometimes the range could be from pre-primer to first grade in one class. So in that particular classroom, the teacher might have to write 5 different targets because her kids are so very different.
That makes
so
sense.
But for the large regular ed classes, they would use the same assessment, and then a second one would be written for a special group.
Okay. And I'm still sort of thinking about what Mr. Lamarck said. The pre-test and the post-test will be different, but you'll still be able to measure growth even though it's not the same test?
Because it's based on concepts that are supposed to be taught throughout the year. So a first grader might have a paragraph to read and answer some questions about that paragraph on the pretest. And then at the end of the year, like comprehension questions, or it might be inferencing or just recall type questions. At the end of the year, they're going to have another passage that they're going to have to answer questions about a different passage. So same concept, different material.
I understand that. It just seems a little more subjective than I would like. Thank you.
Mr. Jeter?
I have just one question. As a school board representative, in your presentation, how much are we supposed to learn from this presentation that you're giving to us this evening? And why is it important for us to learn it as a school board representative?
I think it's important for you to learn it because the people out there probably express to you some of the struggles they may be going through, and to have a background in what it is, to me, seems important.
I think, Mr. Jeter, one of the things we're trying to accomplish is just to share with you everything that a teacher, as a principal, as assistant principal, has going on at their school. You know, we started tonight talking about school safety and #1 priority for that. And then we talk about this and how this is a priority as well. So all these different things are coming at each teacher, each administrator on a day-to-day basis. And that's just getting the day started. That's before you deal with any of the stuff that happens at each one of our schools as we go forward. So as we've talked about as a central office staff, the most important thing that we can do right now is to support the people in the schools and honor and recognize that there's not a tougher job around than what's being done right now in these classrooms.
Thank you. I think that's the answer that I was trying to get to, because, and thank you very much for explaining that. I understand that, but basically, other than just sitting up here listening to what you have to say and understanding exactly what's going on, I understand that, and I praise you and I praise the teachers and the administrators But we could actually sit here all night as school board representatives and not really know a whole lot about what you're talking about.
I think it's just an awareness is what we're hoping for, and it's a starting point. We're not going to walk away from this tonight. We're going to continue to grow with this, and I think all of them will tell you that the states continue to tweak as well. So what we tell you tonight, just like the salary schedule, just like the reduction in force, just like everything else, we might come back to you next month and tell you that it's changed and tweaked along the way. And in my opinion, that's good, because that means they're listening to what we're saying. If they give us something and it doesn't change at all, then to me, that's not good. We're sharing our information. You know, Julie, Regina, Brandon, or I hear from others. Cheryl hears it as well. These three are not only the experts here in our parish. When they go out and represent our school system, as you can tell by the presentation they did tonight, they represent us very well. And people are coming back and asking their opinion, and we're able to be at the table as things are getting changed as we go along, because we got in on the ground floor, because we had a game plan, and because we wanted to be progressive and not just reactive. And I think it's going to pay off not only for the school system, but hopefully as the state goes about changing things as well. You know, as we start a new year, we're blessed for a lot of reasons, but when you see these three people here presenting and you see Cheryl's fingerprint on this and Pete working with them as well, it makes you realize how lucky we are in St. Tammany Parish to have the people that we have working in our central office. And our principals, I get emails from them all the time, and so does Cheryl, Bill, and Pete. They are thankful for our central office staff and the attitude that we're giving, that we're there to support them. And we talk about in every staff meeting, that's got to be our #1 priority right now, is to support our teachers and support our principals and assistant principals. Because I'll tell you, the anxiety level is high. And anything that we can do, small or large, to help them is something that we need to do, and it's something that, you know, we're committed to doing as a school system.
Okay, Mr. Harrell.
You mentioned that this is about a 6-hour process for the evaluator. Have you got a time estimate on the teacher that's going to be evaluated? How many hours are we talking about?
No, sir. I don't have a time estimate on the teachers. They are doing the job that they do every day. So when these observations are done, it's during the school day with the job they already do. The pre-conference that the teacher is required to have with the administrator before the formal evaluation is lasting between 30 and 45 minutes, and that's either done before the school day, on a planning period, or after the school day. The post-conference, once the administrator has done all the scoring, is done, again, before school, on a planning period, or after school, and those are lasting from 45 minutes to an hour. So I don't know, I guess a couple of hours for the teacher twice a year outside of the school day.
But it also seems like a lot of paperwork that they're required to do daily.
They have their normal paperwork that they do daily. The student learning targets probably add a couple of hours that they didn't have before. The assessment is given during the day. The scoring hopefully is done during planning periods. It might be done after school, and then the results are recorded onto that student learning target. So that probably does take a little extra time that wasn't there before.
In a high school, I would imagine 100 teachers would not be an unreasonable number that would have to be evaluated. So that's 600 hours.
Julie, why don't you talk about how it's determined who evaluates at each school?
Okay, each school, let's look at a middle school with 3 administrators. And if there are 100 teachers on campus, the teachers are divided into three groups, and each administrator is in charge of, say, 33 teachers at that particular school. What they do at the beginning of the year, what we helped them do at the beginning of this year, is to look at the amount of teachers that they have, and then to look at this calendar year, and we divided it up into 2 segments. The first half of the year, the second half of the year. So with those 33 teachers, they were to take their calendars and find holes in their calendars when they could observe these teachers for planning purposes, and then they had to set up their pre-conferences and post conferences. Then they're just finishing, and like Brandon said, we're at about 2,200 observations, and they're going to have to repeat this process starting now. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I guess my real question is what kind of magic do you do to create this many more extra hours in a day for a teacher or administrator?
The only magic that we can do here is to provide moral support and support with this system for them and cheer them on, because that's what we're charged to do in this process.
And I know y'all doing a wonderful job, and so are the teachers and administrators, but this just seems like a unusually heavy burden to carry.
Mr. Derman.
My question is real quick. Mr. Javia, you said that this is going to affect the salaries next year?
Yes, sir. The score that they receive at the end of this school year.
I thought the law was amended to where this first year assessment, which is this year, wouldn't go into effect until the following year.
Not for salary purposes.
So just for firing purposes.
The score that they make this year will determine where they are placed on the salary schedule for next year.
But they get 1 extra year to be in effect.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Mr. Womack.
Well, let me qualify my statement first by saying that I do think the administration strives continually to support the teachers and made very clear that with all the new state regulations that they intend to do so. But Mr. Jeter's question was a good one, and basically what I feel we're getting from this, Willie, is that as board members is that these teachers are flat under pressure to perform. And their education certainly doesn't end when they leave Northwestern State University or Southeastern or any other university in this state. However, it's just my take on it. It may be a controversial statement, but it seems like the state's approach to it is more of a winning by intimidation than it is to reward those that do well. This parish as a whole overall, we strive for excellence anyway, you know, but still they're under a lot of pressure to perform. That's what I've learned from it.
Thank you. Mr. Alford?
I guess I got one more question, but it concerns more in the high school level, chemistry and calculus teachers, and which are kind of critical areas for us for recruiting and everything. And those are going to be on the
non-tested grades and subjects.
The non-tested
grades and subjects.
And then that means their students are going to be tested at the beginning of the year and then at the end of the year, and they're going to be evaluated on that.
Yes.
And a lot of students, calculus is a pretty good subject, and the chemistry is a pretty tough subject. And so I'm just kind of worried about those particular teachers in the area going through this method.
Well, Mr. Alfred,
how are we going to fare out with our teachers in that method? That's a shortfall for us, I think.
As a former high school chemistry teacher, I can answer that. I would not expect my students to do very well on a pre-test measure. I would expect them to do poorly, and it would be up to me to hopefully impart a lot of education and instruction so that by the end of the year, they could achieve the goal that I've set. But I would expect very low performance on the pretest because of the content that is very unfamiliar to those students.
I know we had a shortage in those areas, and this method here might be not a pretty good method. That's the only thing I got to say.
Mrs. Seeley.
Thank you, Ms. Smalley. Dr. Mott, my concern again is, like as was stated as before, regarding the hours that have been put in. Curiosity, how many approximate hours as a team did you all have to put toward this one project?
Well, I haven't calculated that. We have become really good friends, though, through this process. I think that our goal was very clear. Our job is to support our administrators and whatever it took. And, you know, we had a big joke at the administrators conference that the only vacation that Cheryl let us go on was to Baton Rouge. And so it was a lot of hours, but it was worth it to help our people through this. And
well, I've also known educators over the years that have gone home and worked after hours on their lesson plans. And I'm looking at this part too. This is another added item that is going to require these extra hours after school and maybe on weekends as far as the students go and planning and so forth. So I do have concerns there. And how do you measure that? How do you measure that as being a problem or not being a problem? But thank you for all of the work that your team has put together here with this, keeping up on the mandates of what has been has come down from our state and getting us prepared and expediting it. I really appreciate the time that you do put in. Thank you.
Mrs. Belisario.
I would just like a quick comment from you or any member of your team referring to Compass. And you called our attention to page 2, the management section. I noticed that to become highly effective, the word student or students appears most of the time. It almost sounds like we're evaluating the students rather than the teachers.
Yes, ma'am. That was called to our attention from the beginning. And the concept from Charlotte Danielson is that to be a highly effective teacher on a daily basis, your students are so well trained and well informed about the workings of your classroom and about rapport and respect that if you were to walk out of the classroom, the students could run the classroom, the students could question each other, the students could investigate. That is the concept of this rubric, that if you reach that level, then you are highly effective.
Thank you, and you would also be out of a job. The students could do it. Thank you.
Mr. Lamarck.
So in order to be a highly effective teacher, the students should be able to teach the class? Is that what you just said?
No, not really teach the class, but you'd be able to release some of the responsibility to the students. It would be a well-oiled machine where students were active participants in many ways.
Active participants in... Well, I taught shop, and I had a lot of active participation, and I had students that were teaching students all of the time. I think that would be a little bit difficult in calculus, because I don't know anything at all about calculus. There's 4 points on the teacher evaluation, is that right?
Yes,
4
sir.
parts of it. And the 4th one is that part about student participation to that level?
The highly effective rating?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. If you look at it, I don't have it right in front of me, but I can pull it up.
But
if you.
Do most teachers actually accomplish that?
Some teachers accomplish that, but it's a hard thing to do.
So we'd have very few highly effective teachers, is what you're saying?
We will see at the end of this year.
That would be interesting, because I'd like to see how they do that in some of those classes. Peter, a while ago you were talking about the salaries for next year. The salary is not actually a salary, is it? It's just a bonus that they're supposed to get if their scores are wherever they're supposed to be?
If you recall, on the salary schedule, pardon my voice, there's 2 parts that can be added to their base, which are the non-stipend, and then there are 2 that are stipends.
Right.
That cannot be added to their base.
Right. Okay.
So they have a base, and then they can add to the base by 2 of those non-stipend categories.
But the total possible is $400 a year, right?
That's what we put in there for this year, yes, sir.
Okay.
Announcements from the President.
The regular board meeting will be held on Thursday, January 10th. Schools and offices will close on Monday, January 21st in observance of Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
With no other business, this meeting is adjourned.